Thank you all for being with us this morning, and thank you to ASID and the partners for bringing us together. You all work in the community space, you understand the needs of community, I was sorry that Uncle Chicka has left us because Chicka Madden is one of the people in our community, in the broader community, that actually understands social change. He's seen remarkable change, not only in his own life, but also in the extraordinary community of Redfern and up the Rabbitohs. If you're not a rugby league supporter, you won't know what that means. But you know, we live in a world where change is with us all the time, and yet there are still communities and organisations that struggle with the concept of change. So I thought our time this morning, which is, for me, I just want to throw out some thought starters. The real talent sits in this beautiful panel that will follow me, and in fact they will be the ones that will be able to answer your questions about social impact, collaboration and innovation. And I want to also acknowledge Dawn and her MC, not only her professional career but her capacity to bring us and weave us all together with her very fantastic skills as the MC for tonight. Today, sorry. It's 7 o'clock on a Friday morning. What more do you expect? And as Kylie know, I'm in the middle of moving. I posted on Instagram my 43 boxed things, and I said, that's just the kitchen. So, only the other day I noted to a non-profit company CEO, looking at her new organisational chart, that I said, for the first time I get a sense of agility and some degree of nimbleness. And it made me think, why do we hear so much now about agility, the words nimbleness, innovation? And once upon a time we used to hear the words certainty and structure and surety. Are they incompatible? Do they go together? How come those strands can't seem to interweave? And maybe they do, and maybe they don't. And first of all, I meant to say at the beginning, when I thought about the Art Gallery of New South Wales, I thought, yes, all of that glass, you won't be able to see a PowerPoint, so I didn't do one, so I apologise for that. But it would have been a lot easier, I think, to draw some of those strands together. However, but the process of change, and as I said, Chicka's seen change in Redfern, we've all seen change in our lives, and we think about the generational change, and I would have been speaking in all the various careers of my life about the concept of change, and change is with us, but it's often the thing that frightens people the most. And change within an organisational structure, a business, or dare I say it, a government department, is that easy to do? And I think I hear the resounding no from most of you in the room. It's nigh on impossible unless there's a genuine desire to deconstruct and overhaul years of business as usual. If you ever hear the words, but this is the way we've always done it, or it is the insert company name, the way of doing things, head for the hills, because you're going to have a fight on your hands. That was said to me only 10 days ago at a board meeting in Queensland, that the particular changes that were being mentioned, oh, no, that's not the X way of doing things. It's simply a defence and the resistance to change. Perfectly normal, but unless you work through that process of that defence, you cannot deconstruct the business to allow change to take place. Without that recognition of the need for change, any organisational system, of course, will atrophy, because it's a living being, it's always growing, it ought to always be innovating and changing. We know that the rapidity of the speed of social change and technology in all of its definitions and areas has opened up vast opportunities and challenges. As a consequence, most organisations have become innovative. But if you think about the Banking Royal Commission, think about how innovation, we're going to be out there. they never actually deconstructed the problems. And I know we'll talk about risk in a minute, but they never really deconstructed the problems and the conflict of interest of selling your own product to the very people, if I can put it so broadly. They're selling their own product to the very people whose funds they are managing. So this is quite a watershed for us in the process of looking at organisational change. And that's something that's really near and dear to my heart. And it really doesn't matter whether it's the banking system or it's an education system or a health system, any business or indeed any government system. Now, I've got to say, there's a real challenge for anybody to get change through a government system. But you don't need me to tell you this. You go on the Twitter sphere, you live it and breathe it every day of your lives. It's in all of the media all around us. I came across a USA online clothing platform called Stitch Fix, which by using algorithms based on data which the clients supply, sends clothing and accessories they think a signed-up customer will like. And they might send it once a week or every 3 months or once in 6 months, whatever you have chosen as the client. What you don't like, you send back. They leverage data science to deliver personalisation at scale. It transcends traditional bricks and mortar and even the e-commerce retail experiences that we're used to. Customers enjoy having the expert stylist do the shopping for them. And I think I'm looking at the rapid eye movement of every woman in this room and half the men. But I have to tell you, unfortunately, they don't ship to Australia. But if you look them up, it's a very interesting program that has actually said, right, data is everything. Yet when you try to get organisations to focus on their data, to even know their data, it becomes quite a different story. If you don't get the analytics right, you don't get the outcomes right. And it's outcomes, not outputs. So this Stitch Fix sold in 2016 $730 million worth of clothing. In 2017, $977 million worth of clothing. I think they're doing something right. And if I was Mr. Meyer or Mr. David Jones, I would be very worried. So these are the traditional institutional organisations which have not addressed their nimbleness at all. And something like Stitch Fix is way ahead even of what we would traditionally view the basic e-commerce train. It's the data, it's the algorithms, it's the way they use that data that gives them their success. So to me, that's innovation writ large. But if we are within an organisation, you have to develop agile teams. And I come back to the comment that I made to the CEO of a board I sit on about the organisation being nimble and agile. And Harvard, coincidentally, a Harvard Business Review magazine article, Agile at Scale, which you can probably get online, defines an agile team as the profitable application of creativity, which is quite interesting, the profitable application of creativity to improve products, services, processes or business models. They are small and multidisciplinary. Confronted with a large, complex problem, they break it into modules, develop solutions to each component through rapid prototyping and tight feedback loops, and integrate the solutions into a coherent whole, which is the model of asset that you heard a few minutes before. So these agile teams drive the change. Dare I say it, but wouldn't social services in this country look different and feel different if they had agile teams rather than bureaucracies focusing on systems and controls? There is a real bit of work to be done there, folks. James Kirby and I were talking earlier, James is the Kirby Foundation, one of the great philanthropists in this country, about what you're reading on the front page of the newspaper about the NDIA is 150% correct. It is becoming a bureaucracy. It is becoming distant from the community, and it actually doesn't have a sense of the lived experience. So we're in for a real problem in that space. Incumbents in bureaucracies are often just focused on policy, and I know many government departments, and one in particular in this state, which has almost lost its mandate to deal with the community. The market forces don't necessarily work every time, and I think we're starting to see that tipping point coming back to us. So with incumbents focused just on policy, they're not addressing the people, and they're nowhere near the real people that they are meant to serve. But in the above definition, note the words profitable application of creativity. No organisation can sustain a loss, but what they do is understand and take risks. And yes, trialling a prototype may make some people nervous, but as a result of a tight feedback loop, you know whether you're on the right track at the right time, and you're flexible enough and fast enough to make the change so that you actually don't go out backwards. Housing's a classic example. And you'll always hear, everybody hears about the affordable housing. I chair the Ministerial Advisory Council on Ageing for the New South Wales Government. One of the issues is housing for older people. You never hear it discussed. You hear it discussed in terms of young families. You hear it discussed in terms of key workers like nurses, police, firemen, hospital workers. Anybody from the Northern Beaches here? Anybody live up the Northern Beaches side? Yes, one gentleman over there. Well, you'll never be able to age in place because you'll never have a carer, because there isn't a carer that will travel 3 hours from Western Sydney to come and look after you. So that's how it's really going to look like, folks, in a very short... And for my end of the spectrum, that's really important. So housing's critical, and housing for older people, especially older women who've survived in the rental market while they've been working, they've been able to afford the rent. As soon as they finish working, they don't have enough superannuation to afford the rent, and the homelessness of women is burgeoning. Discussion on housing only ever focuses on those areas that I mentioned. I saw a modular service for student housing, and I've tried to convince the government that they need to think it's not just, as the Premier says, it's about supply, and many of us are trying to articulate that it is not just about supply, that's a crucial issue, but it's about the variety in that supply. The modular design built by Urban Nest out at Sydney University for student housing is a cluster of 4 or 5 bedrooms around a common area of kitchen, living quarters. And that would suit a number of more senior women who were happy to have the security of being co-located with other people, even co-located with students, perhaps not on that next door level where the noise might be a bit loud, but certainly in the same building. But this idea that we have of siloing, that well, students live over here and older people live over here and young families live out there, we still haven't got that one right. So, you know, this is a program that could be financed by the private sector in a rent-to-build or a licence-to-occupy model and be readily deliverable, and I don't think we're getting any of that traction. Tom's Shoes, an American company. The owner of Tom's Shoes was confounded in Africa by the number of children who didn't have shoes. And not only does that present a health problem because cuts and the tapeworms, the germs, the things that get into the skin, but bare feet meant that you were excluded from school. So the company took up that issue and developed a program through a local African NGO so that for every pair of shoes sold retail in the United States, they donated a pair of shoes to a child in an African village through the African NGO system. That program now operates in 23 countries via their non-profit partners with all sorts of sets of conditions attached to ensure further educational or economic benefits to the children. Now, how clever and fast and swift and agile is that? So let's have a little look at collaboration. Without collaboration, we're nothing. I've seen vast changes over the years as both philanthropy and government funding want to see effective service delivery for the minimum expenditure. and there's nothing wrong with that. Many of you have numerous collaborations in place, and in fact, if we weren't all committed to that, we wouldn't be here. Again, the speed and access to technology allows collaboration and greater opportunities than ever before. I chair Pediatrio. Our CEO, Dr. Kylie Gwynn, is a panellist here this morning. Pediatrio is a collaboration of the Children's Cancer Institutes and the Children's Hospitals in New South Wales. And it's for the first time that organisations, these health organisations, have come together. So we have CCI, the Children's Cancer Institute, particularly through the Zero Children's Cancer Project, Children's Medical Research Institute, the two children's hospitals, the University of New South Wales and the University of Sydney. And they've all got a seat at the table. And we've got a bid in, which will happen, for the creation of the Centre for Paediatric Precision Medicine. And it will be the first time you actually have a true collaboration amongst the researchers. And Kylie is one of our panellists this morning, and you can explore that a bit further. But this is the way of the future for health services, and the idea that the researcher is over here and the clinician is over there, and maybe over a couple of periods of years they might actually get together so that I, the patient, have an outcome. We don't have time for that, and the world is moving far more rapidly. And you will have seen that Australia occasionally, more by good fortune than clear design, gets a seat at the table at international studies. We have brilliant scientists and researchers here, but it's that lack of grunt that collaboration gives you that we will now start to see happen. Kylie and I had the occasion to have dialogue with other international paediatric precision medicine centres, and one of the takeouts for me was the understanding that at some stage we will fail. And I think we don't talk about failure enough in this country. Yes, if you fail, you fail. Have a fast feedback loop, pick it up, turn it around, but understand unless you take the risk or unless you push that view a little bit further, you will never know. And we need to be able to take some of these risks, and those risks need to be managed. But you've got to line the ducks up in a row with strong and tight feedback loops. The collective, I think most of you know about the collective. It's another example of collaboration between the private and the public sector coming together to solve wicked problems without direct reliance on one or other of the two services. I was involved in the very early days, and I think that's really where, Natasha, you and I met, and through ACID, you've picked up on that sense of the government, the private sector, the community need, coming together at the table, and nobody leaves the table until the problem is resolved. Hackathons are doing that all over the place, and some of you have probably participated in that. One of the things we looked at in the very early years, about 4 or 5 years ago, was a women's housing refuge. We were able to establish a house, furniture, and some funding at a time when the government was withdrawing services from a lot of the refuges, in a brain snap that I've never quite understood. In Broken Hill, we brought together First Nations people, the Wilcannia School, the PCYC, a private tourism operator, and they all had a need and they all wanted to work together. So when we phrase that, they all had a need, they didn't realise that they actually needed each other. The kids kept breaking into the Wilcannia School during holiday time because it was the only place where they had Wi-Fi. The tourism operator was establishing a stargazing venture for tourists, so I'm sure she was very busy this week. And she wanted the First Nations people to advise on the history of the area for her tourists and for the locals. The PCYC had just rebuilt their premises, and they offered to house the kids and the elders from Wilcannia who would come into Broken Hill to do the Welcome to Country, talk about the history, and have a barbecue with the tourists and have some stargazing and stay the night before they returned to Wilcannia in the morning. The Premier's department became engaged and solved the problem for the Wi-Fi system, as well as some of the other issues that they had in Wilcannia at the time. Now, without the collective coming together, everybody had been whirling in their own dervish for months on end. And without that collaborative event fostered by the local council, that would never have occurred. So being nimble and agile are not just buzzwords. It's critical that all our organisations look hard and long at our ability to be innovative and creative in the way we address issues. Collaboration is definitely the key for the future. Developing partnerships across like models or with organisations completely different in focus can broaden our horizon as well as our reach. It will lead to a more equitable society. Thank you.